Senator John Kennedy rearranged the pile of updated intelligence briefings on his dark wooden desk, the sound of crinkling paper echoing through the absolute stillness of the hearing chamber. He peered over the top of his reading glasses at Ilhan Omar, who remained stoic and expressionless, aware that the story had leaked, but likely underestimating the depth of his information. Representative, before we delve into matters of international relations, we must confront the disaster that occurred at 4:52 this morning within your congressional district in Minneapolis. While you were resting, 500 federal agents from the FBI and ICE were executing a synchronized operation. They were storming the perimeter of a building designated as a governor's residence, which in reality functioned as the operational headquarters for a massive international criminal syndicate. Omar adjusted her position in her seat, her tone cutting and defensive. "Senator, I cannot be held accountable for the personal conduct of a state governor, regardless of our shared political affiliation." Kennedy raised a palm to interrupt, his voice descending into a menacingly low timbre. "This was not merely a police raid, ma'am, but rather a battlefield confrontation. Federal agents were greeted by automatic weapon fire from a private army of 300 mercenaries inside the home, a military-level defense in the Minneapolis suburbs protecting 6.7 tons of heroin and fentanyl, a quantity sufficient to terminate half the population of the Midwest. Yet, the narcotics are not the most damning discovery, are they? The true horror lies in the finances, as agents uncovered $7.4 billion in hard currency concealed within the foundation walls. $7.4 billion does not accrue without significant political cover and friends in positions of power. Omar leaned closer to her microphone, asserting, "This is an attempt to establish guilt by association, and it is beneath the standards of this committee." Kennedy did not flinch as he extracted a photograph from his dossier. "If we are discussing standards, let us discuss Layla Osman, the bagman apprehended yesterday with $230 million in her vehicle. Her travel records demonstrate a precise mathematical correlation with your official schedule. Every instance, the governor convened a private meeting. You were present in the district. Whenever a shipment bypassed customs through those 120 bribed officials, you were publicly condemning the specific federal agencies attempting to interdict them. $41.7 billion circulated through shell corporations connected to this enterprise while you lectured the public on justice. Is this the justice you envisioned? The poisoning of American neighborhoods while shielding a Somali-American governor who transformed his office into a protection racket for trafficking?" Omar struck the table with her hand, shouting, "That is a fabrication and a defamatory lie intended to tarnish my community." Kennedy leaned in, his gaze freezing cold. "The community is currently grieving, ma'am. Families are waking up to the realization that their elected leaders betrayed them for blood money. We discovered the underground tunnels, Congresswoman. We located the logistics center buried beneath the garage, and we retrieved the communications that explicitly mention federal protection. This was not simple criminality. This was treason woven into the infrastructure of the government. And you expect this committee to believe you saw nothing, heard nothing, and knew nothing about an industrial-level operation occurring in your own territory while you were preoccupied with criticizing American law enforcement?" Omar's eyes flashed with anger. "I will not remain seated here to be accused of criminal conspiracy without a shred of evidence." Kennedy reclined, a grim smirk touching his lips. "The evidence is currently filling entire warehouses as we speak. Tons of narcotics traversed American soil because one man permitted it, and numerous others averted their gaze. But this betrayal extends far deeper than illicit cash or drugs, reaching the very core of whom you serve and your purpose here. which leads us to the question that has plagued this committee regarding your true priorities. Congresswoman Omar, if the United States and Somalia were to engage in armed conflict tomorrow, hypothetically speaking, which side would you desire to win? The inquiry hung in the atmosphere like the smoke from a freshly discharged weapon. Senator John Kennedy's Louisiana accent made the query sound deceptively casual, as if he were inquiring about the climate. Yet every individual in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee room understood this was the fatal blow, the climax of 90 minutes of surgical questioning. Absolute silence descended, the heavy kind that presses against one's chest, making one acutely aware of their own respiration. Ilhan Omar sat at the witness table, surrounded by 3 attorneys in high-priced suits. She had been brimming with confidence when she entered 2 hours prior, defiant and poised. She had weathered Republican offensives in the past, having been labeled a terrorist, accused of anti-Semitism, and investigated for campaign finance errors. She always emerged more robust, more lionized by her supporters, and more effective at fundraising from the controversy. However, this situation was distinct. This was not a partisan skirmish, but a simple inquiry, a binary selection between America or Somalia, and she found herself unable to answer it. 10 seconds of silence stretched into 15, and 15 stretched into 20. The C-SPAN cameras remained zoomed in on her countenance. Every cable news station had cut away to broadcast this live, meaning millions of viewers were watching and waiting. That is an absurd hypothetical scenario, her voice carrying that defensive tone she adopted when trapped. Kennedy did not elevate his volume, for he had no need to do so. It is a straightforward question, ma'am. Every American citizen should be capable of answering it in a single second. Which side would you prefer to see victorious? Another pause ensued. One could visibly see her calculating, the gears turning behind her eyes, because there was no favorable response available. To say America would contradict everything she had preached for years to Somali American crowds about our homeland and our people back home. To say Somalia would end her political career on national television. To say neither would imply the same outcome regardless. I refuse to participate in Islamophobic hypotheticals that are designed to question my allegiance. Kennedy raised a hand, his voice remaining gentle and almost benevolent, which paradoxically made it more cutting. I have not mentioned your religion a single time, ma'am. Not once in 2 hours. I have inquired about your loyalty to nations, not your theology. I have asked which country you would select if compelled to choose between America or Somalia. That is not about Islam. That is about fidelity. He retrieved a document from the pile before him. We possess recordings of you telling Somali American audiences that our homeland is under attack by America. You have stated that our people back home require our assistance. You have referred to Somalia as home in the present tense 43 times within the last 5 years. Therefore, I am asking, when you say home, which nation do you intend? I am allowed to possess a complex identity. You may have any identity you desire, ma'am. You can take pride in your heritage, you can love Somali culture, but you can only maintain one allegiance within the United States Congress. You swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not to the Somali Constitution, not both. 1. So for the final time, if America and Somalia went to war, which side would you want to win? 25 seconds of silence passed, then 30. It was the longest silence in the history of modern congressional hearings. Then, an event occurred that nobody had anticipated. A person in the audience stood up from the 8th row on the left side. A Somali American woman dressed in a black hijab and a professional business suit. Just say America, Ilhan. Her voice was distinct, slicing through the silence like a blade. Why is it impossible for you to just say America? Omar turned to gaze at her, shock clearly registering on her features. This was intended to be friendly ground, as the audience contained Somali Americans, progressive activists, and people who had championed her. The woman's voice grew more resonant. My family selected this country. We fled Somalia because that nation failed us. We arrived here. We took the oath of citizenship, and we were sincere. We declared that America is our home now, not Somalia. America. Why can you not state the same thing? Omar opened her mouth to speak, closed it, and looked toward her lawyers. They were staring down at their notes, powerless to assist her. She looked back at Kennedy. He was waiting, patient, wearing that slight, melancholic smile, as if he already understood how this would conclude. Then Ilhan Omar stood up, snatched her papers with trembling hands, and looked at the committee chairman. I am not going to sit here and take part in this racist spectacle. Kennedy's voice halted her, still calm, still carrying that drawl. Congresswoman, you remain under oath. You cannot simply depart. Watch me. She was moving now, her lawyers scrambling to collect their documents and pursue her. Ma'am, if you walk out without providing an answer, everyone watching will understand exactly what your silence signifies. She paused at the door, turned, and her voice shook with anger, or perhaps fear. My answer is that I do not owe you or anyone else evidence of my loyalty. I took the oath of citizenship. I took the oath of office, and that should be sufficient. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. The oath of citizenship includes renouncing allegiance to all foreign states, specifically renouncing it. But you have not renounced allegiance to Somalia, have you? You still refer to it as home. You still refer to Somalis as our people. You still vote to advance Somali government interests over American interests. The oath is insufficient if you do not honor it. Omar did not reply. She pushed through the double doors and vanished. The hearing room exploded into chaos, with cameras flashing, reporters shouting inquiries, and senators debating. However, Kennedy sat tranquilly, organizing his papers into neat piles, as if he had just concluded a mundane committee meeting rather than dismantled a congresswoman's career on live television. To comprehend how we arrived at this moment, how a refugee success story transformed into a question of divided loyalty, one must rewind 90 minutes, to when Ilhan Omar entered that hearing room believing she could survive this ordeal just as she had survived everything else. Tuesday morning, February the 3rd, 2026, in the Senate Hart Office Building, Room 419. The Foreign Relations Committee hearing room was becoming crowded with journalists, cameras, and staff members. The atmosphere was charged with electricity. Everyone understood this event was going to be consequential. The hearing had been convened following a ProPublica investigation released 3 weeks prior. The headline had been blunt: Congresswoman's Secret Coordination. How Ilhan Omar's office worked with Somali government to influence U.S. policy. The investigation had been destructive, revealing phone records of calls between Omar's office and Somali officials, emails coordinating public messaging, meeting logs that had not been properly declared, and financial records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from Somali government-linked sources to Omar's campaign and her husband's firm. The pattern was irrefutable. Omar would receive a classified briefing regarding Somalia, and within 48 hours she would meet with or call Somali government officials, after which she would vote or issue statements that aligned perfectly with Somali government interests, even when those interests contradicted stated U.S. policy. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee had voted to conduct oversight hearings, and they had subpoenaed Ilhan Omar to testify under oath. At 9:45 a.m., she arrived. Ilhan Omar was 43 years old. She had arrived in America as a 12-year-old refugee from Somalia, spent 4 years in a Kenyan refugee camp, mastered English, become a citizen, worked as a community organizer, and then stunned the political establishment by winning a House seat in 2016. She had been re-elected 3 times. She was a member of the Squad, the group of progressive congresswomen who had become celebrities to the left and villains to the right. She had constructed her career on being attacked and enduring. Every controversy made her more famous, and every Republican assault became a fundraising email. She had learned to transmute opposition into fuel. She entered the hearing room wearing a vivid purple hijab with a matching suit, appearing professional and confident. 3 lawyers flanked her, 2 from a prominent D.C. firm and 1 a Somali-American civil rights attorney present for optics. Her communications team sat in the audience, prepared to live tweet and spin whatever occurred. Omar took her seat at the witness table. She organized her documents, whispered to her attorneys, and looked out at the cameras with that slight, defiant smile she had perfected. This was merely another Republican attack. She had managed worse situations. What Ilhan Omar did not realize was that John Kennedy had spent 6 weeks preparing for this specific moment, not merely on the policy violations or financial improprieties, though those were damning enough, but on something more profound, something that could not be spun or defended or explained away. 6 weeks earlier, in Kennedy's office within the Russell Senate office building, his chief of staff had entered with 3 boxes of documents. "Sir, you requested everything regarding Omar's public statements about Somalia versus America." John Kennedy looked up from the foreign aid bill he had been perusing. He was 73 years old, but appeared younger, physically fit, and mentally sharp. That Louisiana accent and the folksy demeanor caused people to underestimate him constantly. They always regretted doing so. His resume told a different narrative. Vanderbilt undergraduate, University of Virginia Law School, followed by a year at Oxford. He had practiced law for 20 years, served as Louisiana State Treasurer, then won his Senate seat. He was not what he appeared to be. He never had been. "What did you discover?" Kennedy asked. His chief of staff began retrieving transcripts, videos, and audio files. "It is a pattern. It is a..." She consistently identifies as Somali first, American second, or not at all. She refers to Somalia as home in the present tense. She calls Somalis our people. When she speaks about Somali Americans, she uses we and us. When she speaks about Americans generally, she uses they and them. Kennedy began reading through the transcripts. Within 10 minutes, he was taking notes. Speech at a Minneapolis community center, 2019. "Our homeland is under attack by American drones. Our people are being killed." Fundraiser for Somali famine relief, 2021. "We must help our brothers and sisters back home. Our people are suffering." University of Minnesota speech, 2023. "Somalia is in our blood, in our hearts. We can never forget where we come from." Interview with Somali Language Media, 2024. "I will always fight for our people in Somalia. That is my duty." Kennedy looked up. How many times does she refer to Somalia as home or homeland? His chief of staff flipped through his notes. 43 documented instances in the past 5 years, present tense, not where I'm from or where I was born, but home, as in current residence. And America? She calls it this country, or the United States. Never home, never my country. Always this country, as if she were a visitor. Kennedy remained quiet for a long moment. Pull her voting record. Every vote related to Somalia. Foreign aid, sanctions, military operations, everything. They spent 2 weeks analyzing the voting record. The pattern was flawless. 100%. In every single vote, Omar had sided with Somali government interests over stated U.S. policy. Bill to sanction Somali officials with ties to al-Shabaab, she voted no. Amendment to add oversight to foreign aid to Somalia, she voted no. Resolution condemning Somali government human rights abuses, she voted present. 12 votes over 5 years. 12 times she had voted against American interests and in favor of Somalia. But that was not even the most damning aspect. Kennedy's team cross-referenced the votes with her calendar. Every single vote occurred within 2 weeks of her meeting with Somali government officials. It is a pattern, Kennedy told his team. Classified briefing about Somalia, meeting with Somali officials, vote favoring Somali government interests. 17 times in 5 years. That is not coincidence. His chief of staff looked concerned. If you are suggesting she is sharing classified information, I am not suggesting anything. I am going to ask her questions and let her answers speak for themselves. They spent another 2 weeks on the financial trail. Campaign contributions from Somali government-funded organizations, her husband's consulting company receiving payments from Somali business interests, speaking fees from groups connected to the Somali government. All legal, technically. All disclosed, eventually. But the pattern was clear. By the time they were finished, Kennedy possessed a binder containing 50 pages. Every statement where she called Somalia home, every vote favoring Somalia over America, every meeting with Somali officials, every dollar from Somali-connected sources. All cross-referenced, all documented, all public record. He was not going to accuse her of being a spy or a traitor. He was going to ask her which country she served, and he was going to let her answer, or her refusal to answer, tell the story. Now, at 10:00 a.m. on February 3rd, the hearing was called to order. The chairman brought the room to silence. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on compliance with the Foreign Agents Registration Act and Congressional Ethics will now come to order. Opening statements were predictable. Democrats defending Omar, calling the hearing a partisan witch hunt, invoking her immigrant story and her history of being attacked. Republicans calling for accountability, talking about national security, questioning her loyalty. Standard partisan theater that would convince nobody and change nothing. Then it was Kennedy's turn. He stood slowly, arranged his papers, and took a sip of water. The slowness was intentional. It built tension, making people wait and wonder. Congresswoman Omar, thank you for being here today. His voice was gentle, conversational. I know you did not want to come. Nobody enjoys being subpoenaed, but I appreciate your cooperation with this committee's oversight responsibilities. Omar nodded curtly, waiting for the attack. I want to start by acknowledging your remarkable personal story. Coming to America as a young refugee, spending years in a camp, learning a new language, a new culture, becoming a citizen, getting elected to Congress. That is extraordinary. That is the American dream. Omar's expression softened slightly. Where was he going with this? And I mean that sincerely, Kennedy continued. I believe in immigration. When people come here legally, work hard, embrace American values, become Americans, that is what makes this country special. That is what has always made us special. He paused, which is why I want to understand something that has been troubling me. When you became a U.S. citizen, you took an oath. Do you remember that oath? Yes, Senator. Can you recite any of it for the committee? Omar paused, having not expected this question. I swore allegiance to the United States and to uphold the Constitution. You did more than that, ma'am. The oath of citizenship is very specific. You swore that you absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. That means you specifically renounced allegiance to Somalia. Do you remember that part? Yes, but... And then, when you were elected to Congress, you took another oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You remember that one too, correct? Of course. Kennedy sat down, looking at her over his reading glasses. Good, because I want to talk about those oaths today. I want to understand if you have honored them. And I think the American people deserve to understand that too. The temperature in the room changed. This was not going to be about policy disagreements or political philosophy. This was going to be about loyalty. Omar's lead lawyer leaned over and whispered something. She shook her head slightly. She had handled hostile questioning before. She could handle this. Kennedy pulled out a folder. Let me start with some basic, factual questions. Have you ever met with officials from the Somali government? I meet with many foreign officials as part of my congressional duties on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That is not what I asked, ma'am. Have you met specifically with officials from the Somali government? Yes. How many times in the past 5 years? She glanced at her lawyers. One of them started to speak, but Kennedy held up a hand. I would like the Congresswoman to answer, please. Omar looked back at Kennedy. I do not have an exact count. I do. 47 times. 47 documented meetings with Somali government officials, including multiple meetings with the Somali ambassador to the United States, 3 meetings with the Somali foreign minister, and 2 meetings with the prime minister. Does that sound accurate? If that is what the records show, it is what they show. Now, did you register those meetings under the Foreign Agents Registration Act? Long pause. Her lawyers were whispering urgently. Congresswoman? Kennedy prompted. Her lawyer spoke up. The Congresswoman's meetings were part of her official congressional duties and therefore do not require FARA registration. Counselor, with respect, I asked the Congresswoman, Ma'am, did you register under FARA? No, because I was not acting as a foreign agent. I was conducting normal diplomatic. We will come back to whether they were normal or not. For now, I just want to establish the facts. 47 meetings with Somali government officials over 5 years. No FARA registration. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you for your honesty. Kennedy made a note. We will discuss what those meetings were about in a moment. But first, I want to talk about how you describe your relationship with Somalia. Kennedy pulled out a tablet and adjusted his reading glasses. Congresswoman, in 2019, you gave a speech at a Somali-American community event in Minneapolis. You were discussing U.S. drone strikes in Somalia. According to the transcript, you said, and I am reading your exact words, our homeland is under attack. Our people are being killed by American drones. Do you remember saying that? Omar's voice was careful. I was expressing concern about civilian casualties in Somalia. I understand the concern. Civilian casualties are tragic. But I am asking about your specific language. You said, our homeland. You did not say the Somali homeland or their homeland. You said our homeland, meaning your homeland is Somalia? My homeland. I was born there. But you are an American citizen now, ma'am. You have lived in the United States for over 20 years. You are a member of the United States Congress. You represent Americans. When you say our homeland about Somalia, who is the our? Who are you including yourself with? Omar shifted in her seat. A senator. I can have pride in my heritage without— Of course you can. Nobody is questioning your right to be proud of where you came from. But there is a difference between heritage and allegiance. So let me ask again. When you said our homeland, were you referring to Somalia as your homeland? I consider myself Somali American. That is a dodge, ma'am. You can be ethnically Somali and culturally American, but you can only have one homeland in terms of political allegiance. The country you owe loyalty to. So which is it? Is Somalia your homeland, or is America your homeland? No clear answer came. Kennedy did not press. He just moved on. Let me show you another example. In 2021, you spoke at a fundraiser in Minneapolis for Somali famine relief. Noble cause. But listen to what you said. He tapped his tablet, and audio played through the room's speakers. Omar's voice, unmistakable. Our people back home are suffering. The drought has devastated our communities. We must do everything we can to help our brothers and sisters in Somalia. They are our family. We cannot abandon them. Kennedy paused the audio. You said our people back home, not the people of Somalia, not Somalis who are suffering. You said our people back home. Back home, like Somalia, is still home and you are just temporarily away. Is that how you see it? That is twisting my words. I am playing your exact words, ma'am. Audio recording. No twisting involved. You said back home about Somalia in present tense, like it is still your home. Is it? Omar's lawyer jumped in. Senator, the Congresswoman was speaking to a Somali-American audience in a cultural context. Kennedy turned to the lawyer. Counselor, if I went to a gathering of Irish Americans and referred to Ireland as back home, people would rightly question whether my loyalty was to America or Ireland. The cultural context does not change the meaning of the words. She said Somalia is back home. I am asking if that is what she believes. He turned back to Omar. And it is not just once or twice. My staff has documented 43 instances over the past 5 years where you have referred to Somalia as home, homeland, or back home in present tense. 43 times. Would you like me to play more recordings? That is not necessary. Good. Then let me ask you this. In those same 5 years, how many times have you referred to America as home or my homeland? Silence. The answer is 0, ma'am. Not once. You call it this country or the United States, always at a distance, like you are describing a place you live but do not belong to. Why is that? Omar had no answer that would not make things worse. Kennedy pulled out a chart. Let us talk about your voting record in Congress. Specifically, votes related to Somalia. He held up the chart so the cameras could see it. In the past 5 years, there have been 12 bills, amendments, or resolutions in the House of Representatives that directly related to Somalia. Sanctions on government officials, conditions on foreign aid, oversight measures, resolutions condemning human rights abuses. 12 separate votes. Do you know how you voted on those 12 votes? Omar did not answer. You voted in favor of Somali government interests and against stated U.S. policy positions all 12 times. 100%. Let me give you some specific examples. Kennedy flipped to a page in his binder. In 2021, there was a bill to impose targeted sanctions on 15 Somali government officials and military officers who had documented ties to al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization that has killed American soldiers, aid workers, and journalists. The bill was very specific, 15 named individuals. It passed the House 391 to 4. You were one of the 4 who voted no. Why did you vote to protect Somali officials who work with terrorists? The bill was overly broad and would have hurt innocent. Ma'am, I just told you it named 15 specific individuals. How is that overly broad? Sanctions regimes often have unintended consequences. These were targeted sanctions, asset freezes and travel bans for 15 men who were proven to be working with a designated terrorist organization. And you voted no. The only explanation that makes sense is that you were protecting the Somali government's interests over America's security interests. Is there another explanation? Omar's jaw was tight. I voted my conscience based on my understanding of the region. Let me give you another example. 2022. There was an amendment to add accountability measures to $400 million in U.S. foreign aid to Somalia. The amendment required the Somali government to provide quarterly reports showing the aid was not being stolen or diverted to militants. Basic oversight. The amendment passed 357 to 18. You voted no. Why vote against transparency? The conditions were punitive and undermined. They were accountability measures to ensure American taxpayer dollars were not stolen. But you opposed them. Why? No good answer. Kennedy leaned forward. And here is what is interesting, Congresswoman. Every single one of these 12 votes happened within 2 weeks of you meeting with Somali government officials. Every single one. The pattern is perfect. He pulled out another document. Let me show you. August 2021, you meet with the Somali ambassador. 2 weeks later, vote against sanctions. March 2022, meeting with the foreign minister. 1 week later, vote against oversight amendment. September 2023, meeting with the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. 10 days later, vote against a resolution condemning Somali government human rights abuses. Kennedy looked up from the document. 17 times in 5 years you met with Somali government officials and then voted in their favor within 2 weeks. That is not coincidence, ma'am. That is coordination. That is correlation, not causation. It is a pattern. And it raises the obvious question. Were you voting based on your own judgment of what is best for America? Or were you voting based on what Somali government officials asked you to vote for? Let us talk about your finances, Kennedy said, pulling out FEC reports. Your campaign and your family's business interests. He opened one of the reports. In the 2022 election cycle, your campaign received $847,000 from an organization called the Somali American Leadership Council. That is a substantial amount from one source. What is the Somali American Leadership Council? It is a community organization that supports Somali American candidates and causes. It is a lobbying organization, ma'am. And according to its tax filings, it is funded primarily by Somali business interests, many of which have direct ties to the Somali government. You received nearly $850,000 from a foreign government-connected organization. Did you disclose that to your constituents? Her lawyer interjected. The contributions were legal and properly disclosed to the FEC. I did not ask if they were legal. I asked if she disclosed to voters that she was taking money from foreign government-connected sources, because voters have a right to know when their congresswoman is funded by a foreign government. Kennedy pulled out another document. Your husband's consulting firm, the E Street Group. According to public records, it received $280,000 in payments from Somali business interests in 2023. That is triple what the company made the year before. What services did his firm provide to justify that payment? My husband's business is separate from my congressional work. But you live in the same house. You share finances. You file joint tax returns, and his income tripled the year after you started taking regular meetings with Somali government officials. You do not see a connection. Omar's face was flushed. That is innuendo. It is documented fact. Here is another fact. You have done 6 paid speaking events in the past 2 years. Total compensation, $340,000. 5 of those 6 events were sponsored by organizations with direct financial ties to the Somali government. You are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by Somali government-connected sources while voting in favor of Somali government interests. That is not public service, ma'am. That is a conflict of interest. Kennedy's voice got quieter, more serious. Congresswoman, you serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That gives you access to classified intelligence briefings. Is that correct? Yes? Including classified briefings specifically about Somalia? About terrorist threats, military operations, intelligence assessments? Correct? I cannot discuss classified information in this setting. I am not asking you to reveal classified information. I am asking if you receive classified briefings about Somalia. Yes or no? Yes. And after receiving those classified briefings, have you met with or communicated with Somali government officials? Long, dangerous pause. I engage in routine diplomatic conversations as part of my committee work. That is not what I asked. After receiving classified briefings about Somalia, have you met with or contacted Somali government officials? Her lawyers were whispering urgently. This was treacherous ground. I may have had conversations, may have... Kennedy pulled out phone records. These are call logs obtained through FOIA requests. Public record. Let me read you a timeline. August 12, 2023. You attended a closed-door classified briefing on al-Shabaab activity in southern Somalia. That evening, at 7:43 p.m., you placed a 40-minute phone call to the Somali ambassador. What did you discuss in that call? I do not recall the specific. September 3, 2023. Another classified briefing. This one about U.S. military operations planning in the region. That same night, you had a 35-minute call with an official at the Somali Foreign Ministry. What did you discuss? General diplomatic matters. Ma'am, this is a pattern. 17 times in 3 years you have attended classified briefings about Somalia, and within 48 hours contacted Somali government officials. At minimum, that shows terrible judgment. At worst, it is espionage. The word hung in the air like a bomb that had not detonated yet. I have never, ever compromised classified information. I want to believe that. I really do. But the pattern is undeniable. You receive sensitive intelligence about Somalia, you immediately contact Somali officials, then you vote in ways that benefit the Somali government. If you are not sharing classified information, you are at least sharing insights and policy direction that Somalia should not have access to. Either way, you are serving their interests, not ours. Kennedy looked at the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to call a witness, if the committee permits. The chairman, caught off guard, nodded. Proceed. We have a member of the Somali American community here who requested the opportunity to address these issues. Her name is Amina Hassan. She is a constituent of Congresswoman Omar's district. From the audience, a woman in her mid-40s stood. She wore a black hijab and a professional gray suit. She walked to the microphone that had been set up for audience questions. Thank you, Senator Kennedy. And thank you, Congresswoman Omar, for your time." Omar looked wary. Amina Hassan's voice was clear and strong. "Congresswoman, I voted for you in 2016 and in 2018. I was proud, so proud, to see a Somali woman in Congress. I thought you would represent us, represent Somali Americans who chose this country, who love this country." She paused. "But I am here today because you do not represent me. You do not represent our community. And I want you to know that." Omar's expression hardened. "My family fled Somalia in 1993, Amina continued. "During the Civil War. My father was killed by militias fighting over Mogadishu. We spent 3 years in a refugee camp in Kenya. When we finally came to America, my mother cried. She said we were finally safe, finally home." Her voice got stronger. "We became citizens in 2001. I remember the ceremony. I was 16 years old. When we took the oath renouncing allegiance to Somalia, my mother squeezed my hand. She whispered, 'We are Americans now.' And she meant it. We all meant it." Amina looked directly at Omar. "Somalia failed us. The government there is corrupt, violent, controlled by warlords and terrorists. We came to America because we chose America. We love this country. When people ask me where I am from, I say Minnesota. When they ask about my heritage, I say I am Somali American. But when they ask where home is, I say America. Without hesitation, without qualification. America is home." She paused. "But you keep calling Somalia home. You keep taking money from the Somali government. You keep voting to protect their interests even when it hurts America. You are not representing Somali Americans. You are representing the Somali government. And we are tired of you claiming to speak for us." The room was silent. Omar had no response. What could she say? Amina sat down. Kennedy nodded to her. "Thank you, ma'am. Congresswoman Omar, would you like to respond?" Omar looked at Amina, then at Kennedy. I respect her perspective, but I do not think—" "Do you disagree with anything she said?" "I think my record speaks for itself." "It does. That is the problem." Kennedy gathered his papers, organized them. The slowness was deliberate, building to something. "Congresswoman, we have established several things today. You consistently refer to Somalia as home or homeland in present tense, 43 documented instances. You have voted in favor of Somali government interests over American interests, 12 out of 12 times, 100%. You have received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Somali government-connected sources. You have attended classified briefings and immediately contacted Somali officials 17 times. And you have just heard from one of your own constituents, a Somali American refugee like you, saying, you do not represent the community, you represent a foreign government. He looked up at her. So I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, because I believe the American people deserve an honest answer. The room was completely silent. Everyone knew something big was coming. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. If the United States and Somalia went to war tomorrow, hypothetically, an armed conflict between the two nations, which side would you want to win? 10 seconds of silence. 15. The longest silence anyone could remember in a congressional hearing. Omar's mouth opened, closed. She looked at her lawyers. They were staring at the table, unable to help. This was a question only she could answer. That is a ridiculous hypothetical. It is not ridiculous, ma'am. It is the most basic question of loyalty imaginable. Two countries in conflict. Which side would you want to prevail? Every American should be able to answer that in 1 second. Which side would you want to win? I refuse to engage with Islamophobic questions designed to question my loyalty. Kennedy's voice remained calm, patient. I have not mentioned your religion once today. Not once in 2 hours of questioning. I have asked about your allegiance to countries, not your faith. This is not about Islam. This is about whether you are serving American interests or Somali interests. America or Somalia. Which one would you want to win? More silence. 30 seconds now. Omar was trapped, and everyone could see it. From the audience, Amina Hassan stood up again. Just say America, Ilhan. Why can you not just say America? Omar turned to look at her, shock and anger on her face. Amina's voice was louder now. My family chose this country. We took the oath, and we meant it. We said goodbye to Somalia and hello to America. It is not complicated. It is not a trick question. America is our home. Just say it. Another Somali-American man stood in the audience. We can say it. Why can you not? A woman with a hijab stood. You are making us all look bad. You are making people think we cannot be loyal Americans. Omar stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. I am not going to participate in this racist circus designed to make Muslims prove their loyalty. Kennedy's voice cut through, still calm. Ma'am, you are still under oath. You cannot simply leave. Watch me. She was gathering her papers with shaking hands. Congresswoman, if you walk out of this hearing without answering that question, everyone watching, and millions are watching, will know exactly what your silence means. Your refusal to answer is an answer. She stopped, turned to face him. Her voice was shaking with anger. My answer is that I do not owe you or anyone else proof of my loyalty to this country. I took the oath of citizenship. I took the oath of office. That should be enough. Kennedy shook his head slowly. The oath of citizenship requires you to renounce allegiance to all foreign countries. But you have not renounced allegiance to Somalia, have you? You call it home. You vote for its interests. You take its money. You meet with its officials after classified briefings. The oath is not enough if you do not honor it. I am done with this hearing. Omar grabbed her briefcase. Ma'am, I said I am done. She walked toward the exit, her lawyers scrambling to follow. The cameras captured everything. Her angry face, her shaking hands, the way she would not make eye contact with anyone. At the door, she stopped, turned back one last time. You want to know which side I choose? I choose peace. I choose diplomacy. I choose not engaging with your false binaries and warmongering hypotheticals. Kennedy's response was quiet, but devastating. Ma'am, every American soldier, every diplomat, every citizen can say they choose America if forced to choose. Your inability to say the same thing tells us everything we need to know about where your allegiance lies. Ilhan Omar pushed through the door and was gone. The hearing room erupted, senators shouting, reporters yelling questions, cameras flashing. But through it all, Kennedy sat calmly at his desk, organizing his papers like he had just finished a routine committee meeting. The clips were everywhere within minutes. Not the full 2-hour hearing, 30-second segments, the moments that mattered. Our homeland is under attack. Kennedy asking, which homeland? Our people back home. Kennedy asking, back home where? Which side would you want to win? 15 seconds of silence. Just say America. Somali American constituent pleading. Omar walking out without answering. Within 2 hours, which side was trending nationwide? Within 4 hours, it had been tweeted 5 million times. Within 12 hours, every major news outlet had led with the story. And this time, it was not just conservative media attacking her, even liberal outlets were uncomfortable with her refusal to answer. CNN's panel that night, "Look, I understand not wanting to engage with hypotheticals, but it is a simple question of loyalty. Every American should be able to say they would choose America." MSNBC's legal analyst, "Her silence on that question is going to haunt her, because silence is an answer." The New York Times editorial board, Representative Omar's troubling non-answer. But the most devastating response came from within her own community. Friday morning, the Twin Cities Somali Coalition, the largest Somali-American organization in Minnesota, released a statement. "It came to America by choice. We fled Somalia because it failed us, because the government there could not protect us, because we wanted a better life. When we became Americans, we meant it. We chose America. We expect our elected representatives to do the same." Congresswoman Omar's refusal to clearly state her allegiance to America is troubling and does not reflect our community's values. By Friday afternoon, 15 prominent Somali-American imams in Minnesota had signed an open letter. "We love this country. We are grateful for the opportunities America has given us and our children. We are proud Americans who happen to be of Somali heritage. We wish Congresswoman Omar would clearly and proudly state the same." The political consequences came fast. Saturday, the Justice Department announced it was opening an investigation into potential FARA violations based on the testimony and documents from the hearing. Sunday, the House Ethics Committee announced its own investigation into Omar's financial relationships with Somali government-connected entities. Monday, polling showed the damage. 68% of Americans, including 43% of Democrats, believed Omar should have answered Kennedy's question. 71% believed her refusal to answer indicated divided loyalty. 54% believed she should resign from Congress. In her own district, her approval rating dropped 19 points in 72 hours. Tuesday, Don Samuels, the moderate Democrat who had nearly beaten Omar in the 2022 primary, announced he would challenge her again in 2026. His announcement speech was brief. "I love this country without qualification. I love it with my whole heart. I can say without hesitation that if forced to choose between America and any other nation on earth, I choose America, every time, without question." Apparently, our current representative cannot say the same. That is disqualifying. The first poll after his announcement showed him leading Omar by 12 points. Wednesday, 3 members of the squad, AOC, Rashida, Ayanna Pressley, released a joint statement. It was carefully worded. "We support Representative Omar's right to push back against Islamophobic questioning. We also believe that all Americans, regardless of heritage, can clearly state their loyalty to this country." Translation: "We are not defending her silence." Ilhan Omar's office released multiple statements over the next week. Each one tried to explain, contextualize, justify. None of them included the words, "I would want America to win." That was the problem. In all the statements, all the interviews, all the tweets, she never actually answered the question. And everyone noticed. John Kennedy gave one interview about the hearing to a reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate, his local paper, not national media. "Do you think you were fair to her?" the reporter asked. Kennedy was quiet for a moment. "I asked her which country she would choose. Every American should be able to answer that instantly. Every naturalized citizen took an oath specifically renouncing allegiance to other countries so they could answer that question clearly. Her silence was not my doing. I just asked the question. She should have been able to answer easily, if her loyalty was clear. Some say it was a gotcha question. It is only a gotcha if you cannot answer honestly. If you are genuinely loyal to America, you say America without thinking. The fact that she had to think about it, that she could not bring herself to say it, that tells you everything. 6 months later, Ilhan Omar lost her primary. Not by a little, by 18 points. The largest margin of defeat for an incumbent member of Congress in Minnesota history. Her concession speech was brief. She talked about fighting Islamophobia, about standing up for her community, about not backing down from attacks. She never mentioned the question, never addressed why she could not answer it. Maybe because there was no good answer. Either she would have chosen Somalia, which would end her career, or she would have chosen America, which would contradict everything she had said and done for years. Or she could refuse to answer, which is what she did, and which ended her career anyway. In the end, it was not John Kennedy who destroyed Ilhan Omar's political future. It was a simple question. 6 words. Which side would you choose? And her inability to say America. Because if you cannot say you would choose America, if you represent America in Congress, and you cannot say you would choose America over the country you fled as a refugee, then what are you doing there? The lesson, if there was one, was this. You can be proud of your heritage. You can love the culture you came from. You can maintain connections to the place you were born. But if you are going to serve in the United States Congress, you need to be able to say, clearly and without hesitation, that your allegiance is to the United States, not to any other country, not to 2 countries, just one. It is the most basic requirement of public service in America, and Ilhan Omar could not meet it. Her silence said everything.